Hello, everybody. Welcome to From the Other Sideline. I'm Melissa Treebosser, your host, representative of the number 8 TCU Horned Frogs football program, 6-0, and headed into, for now, the fourth consecutive week, the biggest game of their season. This week, it's Kansas State coming to town for a top 25 matchup. The Wildcats, currently ranked number 17 in the AP poll, will come in for a night game, a primetime showdown under the lights. It's a blackout for TCU, which means only one team on the field for change will be wearing primarily purple, but that doesn't mean that this one is going to be any less intense. In order to get a view from the other sideline on the Kansas State Wildcats, I reached out to my good friend Luke Thompson. We just recorded his Bring on the Podcast show right before this, so lots of great information to talk about from both my show and his. Luke, thank you so much for joining us. How are you feeling with a similarly highly ranked, high expectations Kansas State football team behind you?
Yeah, I mean, just trying to forget about that Tulane loss as much as I can, but otherwise, feeling great. I think we're seeing improvement from Kansas State every week. That's been good. Um, and it's been kind of ugly sometimes. The Iowa State game obviously was a little bit closer than we would have liked, but they got it done. And kind of with the bye week, that always helped a lot in Bill Snyder years. And I think Chris Kleiman is a guy that can take advantage of that too. And it's always good to kind of get that rest and to get everybody healthy.
I think Farmageddon is always kind of an ugly game, right? Like that
Yeah.
one's not, it's just the whole vibe of it is it's supposed to be pretty. You mentioned the Tulane game, and I do want to talk about that kind of right off the bat. I guess my big question is what happened?
Well, so the working theory is that Adrian Martinez was just so terrified to not turn the ball over that he didn't really try to be himself. He was very hesitant, even running the ball. He looked hesitant, and then passing it was just like, I'm trying not to throw an interception, and that's really not what you want from your quarterback. And to give credit to Tulane, they're a better team than everybody thought they were. I mean, I think they hopped into the AP top 25 for the first time this week. So, but yeah, and they bottled up Deuce Vaughn, and Adrian Martinez couldn't throw or didn't. I don't know, and maybe I think part of that is on the coaches too, because they talked there a lot of the offseason about, hey, he's gonna cut down on the turnovers, he's gonna do this, and so he did that, but it was like at what cost? And so it became a problem. And K-State's defense was great as they usually are, but they spent a lot of time on the field because the offense couldn't move the ball, and yeah, ended up losing.
Well, I think a lot of times, if you don't have the right culture, you don't have the right foundation built, that a loss like that can really derail your whole season. And for Kansas State, that was by many a kind of a dark horse pick as a Big 12 contender to bounce back after that disappointing loss and come back. And we all know Oklahoma is trash now, but back in that moment, that they were
Yeah.
one of the favorites to win the conference. So to come back and win that game on the road, what happened between week 3 and week 4 to create such a dramatic change?
Well, I mean, and Chris Kleiman immediately talked about it after the game, like we've got to let Adrian loose a little bit. We've got to let him relax and tell him to be more aggressive. And obviously he did. He had probably the best game of his career against Oklahoma. He ran wild. There was no more hesitation. He wasn't by any means forcing pass. He didn't even have a great passing game, but he ran the ball really well. Oklahoma's defense doesn't know how to defend running quarterbacks. And also, I think there's the fact that, K-State's beaten Oklahoma 2 of the last 3 years before that. So, like, they had that confidence that they could go into Norman and get that win, and they got the job done.
I think one of the things that's most terrifying about Kansas State this year is they can win a shootout. I mean, the Oklahoma game was 41-34, and they can win ugly. Farmageddon was 10-9. This is a team that seems to be willing to kind of do what needs to be done in order to secure a victory. Is that a product of just kind of Chris Kleiman's system, or is that just a total buy-in from a team perspective of we care more about the result than we care about how we get there?
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter. I mean, it just they're looking to win any way they can, and they're gonna take what the defense gives them. Chris Kleiman and the coaching staff knows how to play to their players' strengths, and you're getting better at that every week. And they know they've got, one of the best defenses in the conference, and they've got some really explosive players on offense with Deuce Vaughn and Adrian Martinez, and Malik Knowles when he's right. Uh, they're able to do a lot of good things.
Let's just get right into Deuce Vaughn because I feel like I'd be doing a disservice to spend any time not talking about him. He's obviously, he burst onto the scene, a couple of years ago, and has really kind of elevated himself to being one of the elite players in college football. And again, when you look at him, you're like, this guy does not look like one of the best running backs in football. And yet here we are with him having broken the hearts of many a college football fan over the last couple of years. What is it about Deuce Vaughn that makes him just so special as a player, but so dangerous in this offensive system for Kansas State?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because almost as soon as he started playing, people started comparing him to Darren Sproles. They're like, "Hey, another short, quick guy," and I was one of those people who was like, "Well, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Hold on." But at this point, it's undeniable. I mean, he's got that Sproulsian kind of attitude, and I think a lot of it starts with the work ethic, honestly. But both those guys just work so hard, and both of them put up huge numbers in high school, just crazy numbers. In Texas for Deuce Vaughn, and coaches still said, "Oh no, he's too small." And K-State gave him a chance, and I think he's kept that humility and keeps working hard. And just anybody that talks about him will say just how good he is in practice and how great of a teammate he is and all this. And he could kind of just do whatever you ask him to. And he's kind of like Darren Sproles too. He's stronger than you think. A lot of people say, oh well, yeah, sure, he can juke guy out of his shoes in the open field and go off tackle and all this, but he can run up the middle too. Sometimes K-State fans wish he would not run up the middle as much because we don't want to get hurt, but he he can do that as well, and he's just so dangerous. He's shown himself to be a pretty good pass catcher. I mean, he's got great hands, and they send him deep every once in a while. Obviously, his speed, you can't just stick a linebacker on him, and so he can beat you in so many different ways. And just kind of like, I mean, the same way that Darren Sproles could, and everybody loves to block for him and to play with him. And it's so much fun to watch as a K-State fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's one of those players that with one touch can really change the whole aspect of a game and the outlook of a game for Kansas State. And he can certainly change the momentum. And he does play with that fire and that enthusiasm. He's one of those guys that when you're not playing him, you love to watch him. But when you're playing him, all you can think about is how long before this guy busts one, because it's going to
Yeah.
happen pretty much every single week. And it's terrifying as an opponent of what, especially an opponent who's really struggled to stop running games here the last couple of
Well,
years.
yeah, I
So
mean, and even in the Iowa State game, I mean, they did a nice job of bottling him up, better than anybody else has this year. And there is still, quite a few plays where he was one tackle away from breaking free.
yeah,
So,
it's an inevitability. He is an inevitable, right? So with the thing that might make him just slightly more dangerous even this year is that as many good running quarterbacks as Kansas State has had through the years, they really haven't had an athlete quite like Adrian Martinez. And I mean, maybe that's an unfair characterization,
yeah, I
but
mean, there's a guy named Michael Bishop that a lot of K-State fans remember if you want to go
so you
back
have to
that
go back
far.
away.
But
Yeah, you do have to go
yeah,
back
yeah,
away. So I'd say that in the TCU's been a part of the Big 12 era. They haven't
okay,
had a guy
sure,
like
sure.
Adrian Martinez, but yeah, you could go back and find some pretty
You don't think
amazing.
Alex Delton would qualify?
I'm not saying he's out of the conversation. I'm just
Yeah,
saying he's in a
yeah,
different part of the conversation.
sure.
I think again for general college football fans, Adrian Martinez has got to be one of the most maligned Power Five quarterbacks of the last several years. And
Yeah.
it's not his fault that he went to Nebraska, and that they tried to have him murdered and destroyed every single week. What has this? First of all, what were your feelings when they brought him in? Because I don't think many college football fans saw him as a potential reclamation project. And second of all, what has this fresh start and the clean slate done for him, not just in what he's capable of doing on the field, but his mentality off of it?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely made me a little nervous because all you heard about was how he and Nebraska found a way to, steal defeat from the jaws of victory all the time. And but I mean, you also knew that he was a great athlete, and you knew that Nebraska's offensive line was absolutely horrible, and that Kansas State has a really good offensive line. And so, kind of the hope was, well, okay, we can make it different. And then, the other thing that I think a lot of K-State fans recognize is well, we've got, some promising young quarterbacks and like a Jake Rubley, but they're probably not going to be ready for this season. So yeah, we need somebody, so might as well take the chance on Martinez. And I think felt like, Chris Kleiman obviously has had a lot of success with quarterbacks with, Carson Wentz and the Stick. I can't remember his first name at North Dakota State, but he knows what he's doing, and hopefully he can get things figured out. And yeah, I think Adrian bought into the culture immediately, and that was obvious in the summer. He talked about how he felt at home at Kansas State, and the tradition of running quarterbacks here, I think, was a factor too. Kind of helped him and helped his mindset, and the coaches and him have seemed to really click, even before the games. Although like I said, there were some issues during the season of, well, how do we set him free and that kind of stuff. But um, I think generally that they have clicked well, and then they've figured each other out, and it's been a positive situation for him and for Kansas State.
Yeah, I think that the outsider perspective is the recipe to beat Adrian Martinez, both at his Nebraska days and out at Kansas State, is that you've got to make him throw the ball. Now, you brought this up when we were talking earlier on your show that no, he hasn't really had to do that, but he's certainly more than capable of it. Do you still think that there are fair questions about his passing ability, or have you seen enough out of him this year to believe that if TCU is able to slow down the quarterback run game or slow down to any degree Deuce Vaughn, that Adrian Martinez could win a shootout with Max Duggan and TCU?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's not a guy that's gonna win a football game with his arm, I guess, but he's good enough to make throws to. If you focus a lot on the run game, then he can make some of the throws and find receivers. I mean, Kansas State against Iowa State had two 100-yard receivers, which doesn't happen a lot for Kansas State football. So that was pretty exciting. And honestly, there are sometimes more questions about his receivers than there are about Adrian. But he's able to make some of those throws. You're not going to expect him to make the great touch passes or anything like that. And he's done a lot better job of not forcing throws like he did at Nebraska. And I think a big part of that is just not being under pressure as much as he was. So yeah, I think it's also he's kind of similar to his offensive coordinator is Colin Klein. No one
Please don't bring that
remembers.
name up. Please don't bring that name up to a TCU podcast. Like, we don't want to hear it.
He wasn't ever the best passer, but he can make the throws that he needed to get the job done. So I think that's kind of where Adrian is.
Well, and it's not like Kansas State hasn't played some good defenses and he hasn't had to win a game with his arm yet. And so, I mean, I guess that's maybe that'll never come into question or be a necessity this year. You brought up the questions about the wide receivers. Let's talk about them a little bit. Kansas State has had some absolutely elite wide receivers through the years. I think Malik Knowles is a guy that everybody thought was going to be really,
Right.
really strong. And, him and Phillip Brooks both have 20 receptions already on the season. They're inching in on that 300-yard mark apiece. But there have not been a lot of passing touchdowns for Kansas State. Is that a product of, again, like picking what the defense is giving them and not really needing to throw the ball much in the red zone? Or are there some questions about the receiving core at Kansas State this year?
Yeah, well, it doesn't help when you fumble the ball at the 1 yard line like Malik Knowles did against Iowa State. But and he's a guy that ever since he first stepped in the field, he's clearly a guy that has all the tools. He's got the speed, he's got the size, he's got good hands, but the consistency has never been there. It's getting better. I think it's been encouraging this season. He's becoming a little bit more of the go-to guy that K-State wants him to be. And then Phillip Brooks, super fast. Obviously, he's a great punt returner, and he's become a bigger part of the receiving game this season. Still not necessarily a guy that you're gonna rely on when you really need a first down, but he's a receiver that can make some plays and can be a deep threat for sure.
you brought up the offensive line, and I think the thing that I wrote about this week is that if there's one team in the Big 12 that you feel strongly is going to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, Kansas State is probably the best, both offensively and defensively. I'm terrified of your defense. We'll get to that in a second. But with all the great running backs, with a running quarterback, a lot of times that could be a difficult assignment for an offensive line, especially when you have there's a lot of design runs, obviously, called for Martinez, but a lot of it too is just him kind of breaking out of the pocket, making a decision. How is that offensive line adjusted? Is that just a product of this is what Kansas State has been doing forever, and so this is just kind of the way this team is built?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of what they do and what they've always done. And it's a veteran group. They've been there a while, and they lost a couple guys last year, but brought back, I think, a lot of starters, and there's just a lot of knowledge in that group, and they know what they're doing. And they also, they speak very highly of the offensive line coach as well. They're blanking on his name right now, but
It happens.
yeah.
It's a Sunday night. It is late. We've been doing this for over an hour, so people give us a little bit of a break on that. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. I don't want to talk about the Kansas State defensive line. I don't. I'm terrified of them. The Oklahoma, Kansas has a really good defensive line. Oklahoma State has a really good defensive line. Neither of those teams have a Felix. And he might be the most terrifying player that TCU is going to face on defense this year. 6.5 sacks already for 30 yards of loss. He has a couple of quarterback hits. He's forced 2 fumbles. He's got 8 tackles for loss. This is an NFL caliber player who is just eating opposing offensive lines for lunch, and TCU is ready to serve up those appetizers on a platter on Saturday. What makes him so effective, and what kind of game do you think he can have against a TCU line that has certainly struggled the early part of this season?
Yeah, I mean, TCU fans might remember when he had 6
No,
sacks last season.
there's certain things that you don't bring up to TCU fans. This is one of them, but it's fine. We'll give you that. Yeah. He had a pretty nice game against the Horned Frogs last year.
Yeah, I don't know. He's just been so dominant. It just seems like he's almost seems unblockable at times. He's just so good at getting to quarterbacks and getting, past the offensive lineman.
And he's one of 5 guys so far in this defensive line that have at least 1 sack too. And so it's not
Yeah,
like, if you can't just
yeah.
say, oh, we're going to double team your best player and take everybody out. Like if you try to contain him, there's still a lot of other guys that can get to the quarterback and cause some problems. And even with a mobile quarterback like Max Duggan, who's obviously one of the better running quarterbacks in the country, that still could pose a lot of problems. Defensively, do you think that the success of Kansas State just starts with their ability to get in the backfield? Are they so disruptive that it's not allowing plays to develop down the field?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, it's been so great to have Khalid Duke back this year, linebacker. He's been great. Daniel Green, the linebacker, but then inside Eli Huggins has been good on the line. So many guys that have been so disruptive, and then they've stopped the run game, and that's why Kansas State has the best pass efficiency defense in the conference. I think is because of that defensive line more than because of the secondary, because they don't give the quarterbacks a lot of time to throw.
Well, and talk about that run defense as well. TCU obviously has a really effective running game. Kendre Miller is a really great player. And Amari DeMarcado has kind of come out of he's been a guy that's been around college football. I think since I think he was wearing a leather helmet his freshman year, but he's been really effective this year too. What are they doing so well to kind of bottle up the opposing run games? And do you think that they're going to be able to have some success against what's been a pretty potent run attack for TCU?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more team speed than Kansas State has had in quite a while, and it starts with a guy like Daniel Green, who's a first team All Big 12 linebacker, and then when you've got a guy like Felix on the edge that can contain and help guys fill some of those gaps, and they've just done a great job of tackling and not letting anybody really break free this season.
Well, and if you get that run game bottled up, you look to exploit at the Kansas State secondary in the passing game, all you have to worry about is the fact they already have 9 interceptions this year. This is
Yeah.
a pretty solid secondary, and it seems like it's a pretty opportunistic group as well. Turnovers, like we've mentioned on your show, it could be a little bit of a product of luck and ball bouncing the right way. Is this, are these just ball hawking quarterbacks and safeties, or has there been a little bit of luck involved in some of these turnovers forced as well?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's always some luck involved, but there's also a lot of talent in that secondary. On our show, I thought my co-host JT talked about Julius Brents, who's a all Big 12 level cornerback, and I'm sure he's looking forward to getting the chance to go up against some of the TC receivers, especially Quentin Johnson. Big chance for him to show out. Echo Boydo has been solid at cornerback as well, and just yeah, a lot of players who have been around for a while, and I think they are opportunistic a little bit and looking for those opportunities. K-State's been kind of a bend but don't break defense at times under Chris Kleiman, and they've done a nice job of really buckling down when they need to and making plays.
The thing that surprised me most when you were talking about Julius Brents is the fact that he's 6'4". You don't see a whole lot of college cornerbacks that are 6'4", and frankly, you don't see a lot of those types of players at Kansas State.
Yeah.
TC's best weapon the last 2 weeks has been Quentin Johnston, and he's also 6'4", and he's not faced a guy like you're not going to be able to do the too small celebration against Julius Brents, right? And so I think a lot of times you don't see those big corners because A, they say, oh, well, they make that guy a wide receiver, but B, it can also be just the flexibility at that size. Does he have the athleticism to kind of match up with Quentin Johnston? Do you expect to see them kind of one-on-one a lot this weekend, or will there be more safety help over the top to try to take away a guy who's, closing in on 400 yards over the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think K-State coaches might be willing to give him a shot, and he is a transfer from Iowa, so obviously the offense is not great there, but a strong defensive pedigree coming from there, and he's been very effective at bottling up receivers, and I think he's a guy with NFL aspirations, so this is going to be a chance for him to sort of show what he can do, and I think the coaches have enough faith in him to give him a shot to do that, and hopefully it works out.
Yeah, if you're going to be paying attention to one-on-one matchup, I think it's Julius Brents and Quentin Johnston on the outside is going to be something for fans to really be keyed in. I also want to see what I don't want to see, but I'm going to be watching what Deuce Vaughn does to TCU linebackers, who got a little lost a couple of times Saturday against Dominic Richardson and Spencer Sanders, two guys who are not nearly what Adrian Martinez and Deuce Vaughn are. So I think those are going to be two areas to really focus in on when TCU is on defense with Deuce Vaughn and the linebackers, and then when they're on offense, if Quentin Johnston can kind of get one over on Julius Brents after eating alive everybody they threw his way the last 2 weeks. It's going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to watch sometimes. I feel like defenders, you can almost see them shaking when Deuce Vaughn approaches them in the open field
Yeah.
one-on-one. It's just not a
Yeah.
situation you want to be in.
Of all of the people in this conference that I do not want to have to make an open tackle against, Deuce Vaughn is absolutely up near the top for sure. Special teams, I think, is going to play a big role. Like when you look at playing a ranked game and this type of environment, two teams who, on paper, there's a lot of evenly matched ability. Like, obviously, I think TCU is a little bit better in the passing game, and I think that Kansas State's markedly better at the defensive front. But there's a lot of evenness across the board. So if it comes down to special teams, the Darius Davis Phillip Brooks battle. You mentioned this is TCU going to kick to Phillip Brooks? He only has 3 opportunities to return the ball. Now he's got 1 touchdown already. Is Kansas State going to kick to Darius Davis? He struggled against Oklahoma State, but otherwise has been just outstanding this season. How do you feel about Kansas State's ability to impact the game, both in the return game, and if it comes down to field goals? TCU and Oklahoma State just had unbelievable field goal kicking on Saturday. That luck's got to run out in college football, right, at some point. But if it comes down to it, what do you think about Kansas State's kicking situation this year?
Yeah, the return game I feel great about. The kicking game, it's a little more sketchy than we're used to seeing in Manhattan. Even the return coverage hasn't been all that great. Ty Zentner is a great punter. They've been fine with him. Chris Tennant kicking field goals has been a little shaky. I think he's 9 for 12 now this season, but just 4 for 7 beyond 30 yards. Um, he hasn't been all that great. And well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like you grade on a curve at Kansas State for kickers, and so he maybe average to above average elsewhere, but um, it's yeah, it's been a little bit nerve-wracking every time he goes out to kick it this season for sure.
Well, maybe that'll be something that actually plays into TCU's favor for a change. Griffin Kell had an unbelievable game Saturday, coming off of being kind of banged up all season. When he hit that 46-yarder, I think that's when TCU fans went, oh, maybe we do have a shot today. You never know. It's going to be interesting. I think too, Kansas State's is very disciplined program. I think Chris Kleiman, that's one thing that's really carried over from the Bill Snyder era is this is a disciplined team. They know who they are. They know what they want to do. And they're really capable of executing that at a high level. And in a veteran group, this is a pretty veteran program, even with the fact they're starting a transfer quarterback. These are a lot of guys that have been around for a long time. Do you expect that what we're hoping is going to be a really electric atmosphere in Fort Worth? The night game is TCU's first night game since Tarleton State, and home night game since Tarleton State. Do you worry at all about the environment kind of playing into that being a factor? If this is another sold out crowd, it's a primetime game, it's a blackout, all of those things, or do you think this is a mature enough group where that won't get in their head too much?
Yeah, I think this is something that for the most part these guys can handle. I mean, obviously you saw they went into Norman and weren't intimidated by that atmosphere. So
Back when Oklahoma was still relevant too.
right,
So they were the first ones to kind of start to knock them off their pedestal.
yeah, back when their fans still thought they were great.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think with Adrian Martinez leading the way, he's an older guy, and Deuce is still just a junior, but he's or yeah, and so but he's always been very mature for his age, and so I think they'll be in good shape as far as that goes.
When you look at Kansas State's season overall, obviously this is a huge game for both programs. I think they both have aspirations at this point of playing for a Big 12 title, making it to Arlington. Kansas State still has most of their toughest opponents ahead of them. And I would say the same thing for TCU. Like getting past Oklahoma State was big for the Horned Frogs. But I mean, I think Oklahoma State's a really good team. I really do. They absolutely fell apart in the fourth quarter, but to this point, they've done some really good things. What is your realistic, purple tinted as you want them to be, expectations for this program? What are they capable of? If they win against TCU on Saturday, like where's the ceiling for this team? If they don't, if TCU prevails, does it change your expectations for the program overall this year?
Yeah, I mean, they got a lot of talk at the start of the season as a Big 12 dark horse, and I think that was warranted. There's a ton of individual talent. One thing that I worry about with this team is that the depth a little bit. If they get a couple injuries in the wrong places, I think things could go downhill in a hurry. But if the important pieces stay healthy and they keep playing like they're in, Adrian Martinez keeps, making the progress that he's shown, then I think a Big 12 championship is definitely within reach for this group.
How much does coming off of a bye week ahead of this game for TCU help Kansas State? You've talked about that with Bill Snyder was so good coming off of bye weeks, and Chris Kleiman's been really good as well. I mean, is that ultimately something you think could be the difference maker Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think it could be a boost. Like I said, we the coaches and are still kind of trying to figure out how to best utilize Adrian Martinez and his skill set, and I think he's getting that figured out. So certainly a bye week will help in that as well. And then just always getting guys healthy in the Big 12. It's a grind, and there have been some minor injuries. Nothing huge yet, fortunately, but always good to get those banged up guys ready to go, and I think they'll be in good shape for Saturday.
All right. Well, you made me put a prediction on record, so I'm going to do the same thing to you. Again, I feel like I've said this every week, but this is unquestionably the biggest game on TCU's calendar to this point. The more that you win, the more that these games start to matter. This is ranked on ranked. It could have been a game day game. It's not, but whatever.
Yeah,
Have
UCLA,
fun
Oregon,
in
really?
Eugene, guys. Come on. Actually, Eugene is really, really cool. We both know that. So
True.
yeah, it's really cool. But this one is huge. And when you start looking at tie breaking scenarios, the winner of this game has a huge advantage going forward as we hit kind of the meat of the schedule for both teams. So how do you see Saturday going? Who's going to be your offensive MVP, your defensive MVP, and who prevails at the end?
Well, let's start with defensive MVP because I think Felix will have another big game. I'm
So sad
hopeful.
about that. So I'm so terrified of that. But yes, it's hard to argue.
That seems like the obvious choice there. I guess offensive MVP probably go Adrian Martinez. I think he I imagine TCU will be focused on stopping Deuce, and a lot of teams have done that, and it's kind of given Adrian some more room to run. I hope he can take advantage of that. And he will probably be asked to make some throws, and that's where I get, I guess, a little nervous. And I don't know, TCU's offense has just been so good and so explosive that I think I am going to go ahead and pick the Horned Frogs, say like 31-28 or something like that.
We both kind of went in the
Yeah,
lower ish for these two teams, the lower
yeah,
scoring kind of
yeah,
variety. I think it's going to be. We both went 3-point games too. I'm of
yeah,
course
yeah.
well known at this point on the Frogs Today staff as picking against the Frogs for superstitious reasons. So I don't like that you picked them to win, but we'll see who prevails. I think we're in for another instant classic. TCU's now played two just like kind of down to the wire, insane games, and I think we're going to get a third one. So rip my heart and my end of life, but it's fine. We're okay with it. Luke, tell folks where they can find you and find your work.
Yeah, so bringonthecats.com. Occasionally write, mostly just at Bring on the Podcasts for SB Nation, and then at Ahern Alley on twitter.com. Yeah, I tweet a bunch of things.
Always a good follow on game day for sure. Absolutely appreciate your time. Appreciate you putting in burning the midnight oil here on the West Coast with me. Luke and I always talk about how great it is to have us two fans of Midwest teams actually have somebody on the West Coast to do these things with. So really appreciate your time. I think we're in for a really great game. Unfortunately, again on Saturday, another instant classic, and I just think it's really, really hard to predict which of these teams. It's going to come down to a lucky bounce or something in the return game, I think, and both teams are certainly capable of making that happen.
Yeah, should be fun. And hopefully the baseball will cooperate and they'll get to be on network television too.
That would be amazing. Maybe they'll no more break-ins for Aaron Judge home runs. So awesome. Thank you so much, Luke, for joining us on From the Other Sideline. We look forward to a good one on Saturday. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks.